Injuries dominated the conversation around the Mariners rotation in 2025, but they've also been a much different group on the road than at home for a while now. So, what gives? And what does that mean for 2026? We'll discuss coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Wednesday, February 25th, 2026. You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. My name is Titan Gonzalez, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Colby Patnode. We're two lifelong Mariners fans who've been covering the team for over half a decade, and today we're continuing our 2026 season preview with a look at the Mariners starting rotation and give our thoughts on, of course, Bryan Woo, Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, Luis Castillo, Bryce Miller, as well as Kade Anderson, and more. But before we do that, just want to quickly apologize for some technical issues that we had to deal with, unfortunately, yesterday. Apparently, as far as I'm aware, there was a glitch that affected all or at least most of the Locked On shows, and we were unfortunately one of those shows that were affected, and so our episode yesterday didn't get uploaded to Spotify and Apple and all those podcast platforms immediately. I know that it's up now. I don't know exactly when it finally went up, but hopefully you've been able to listen to that episode. If you haven't, though, it's a really fun episode. We go over round one of our top 50 Mariners moments bracket. And we would love for you to also participate in that. If you haven't already, just hit the description or hit the link in the description of that episode, either on YouTube or on your preferred podcast platform. But I believe everything is fixed now, but just wanted to say sorry for that. If you were obviously, excited to listen to a new episode at the time that you usually listen to it. And hopefully you're able to do that with this one. Hopefully if you're listening to it, that means that that is the case. Anyway, all right, let's get into our starting rotation preview, Colby. And I want to talk about the Mariners rotation as a whole here real quick. I want to look at the broader picture first and foremost before we talk about these guys individually. So the last couple of years, it's been a tale of two rotations for the Mariners. At home, for the most part, they've been fantastic. They've been dominant. They've been one of, if not the best rotation in all of baseball. On the road, though, this past year, they finished 17th in FIP. The year before that, they were 16th in FIP, and that's after being 4th in road FIP in 2023. So what gives? What do you think this maybe says about the Mariners rotation? And is it fair at this point to wonder if maybe we've overrated them based on how well they've pitched at T-Mobile Park specifically? And obviously we know how much that ballpark benefits pitching in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I think the really tough thing is to judge last year's rotation, just because, 4 of them missed time. And notice how they still won the division and went to the LCS. Imagine that. But anyways, some of you guys know what I'm talking about. It's tough to judge them. Like, they didn't take a step forward. So it's like, is 2025 and proof that 2024 is real, or is 2024 the outlier? And the injuries are what caused it to look more like 2024 than 2025, blah, blah, blah. In general, we know that like Luis Castillo is very good at T-Mobile Park and not very good on the road. And that makes sense because you look at the stuff and you kind of look at the type of pitcher he is. It would make sense for him to be better at T-Mobile Park. But yeah, I think in general, in terms of like, are we overrating these guys? Maybe, because our assumption has always been that these guys will get better from, the time we saw them to now. And reality, 4 of the guys got worse last year. Kirby, Gilbert, Castillo, and Miller. Now, Miller had the most serious of the injuries. It affected him pretty much all year, as we know. But Kirby missed all of spring training in like the first month, and Logan missed a month, and Luis was still pretty good. I mean, he regressed a little bit, but not as much as people seem to think. And so he continues to be a little bit underrated. But he's still rock solid. But yeah, he's not what he was 2-3 years ago. And so you kind of end up in a spot where it's like, yeah, we thought we had this great rotation, but 4 of these guys get hurt. They're just a little less effective when they come back. And, that's just the reality of something you have to deal with. And even Woo definitely, got better, but even he missed crucial time because unfortunately the pec? It was a pec strain or whatever.
Yeah.
That cropped up at the absolute worst possible time. And that impacted him in the playoffs, as in he wasn't really able to go all that much. So yeah, it's tough to say how much of last year is just them getting back to who they were in 2024 and how much of that is like, no, they were actually going to be the 2023 selves. It's just, you had a shoulder injury that cost you 6 weeks. You had an elbow injury that cost them 6 weeks. You had bone spurs that sporadically, cost Bryce weeks at a time, and he was never really all that effective. And then obviously Woo misses the playoffs essentially because of his late season pec injury. So, it's one of those things where it's like, it's really hard to judge, because 2024 technically could still be the outlier of how they perform on the road. Because like you said, in 2023, they were really good. Now, different rotation, different skill sets at that time. So it's really tough to say. I don't know if they're overrated. Maybe we've overrated them based on their ceiling more so than what they've actually produced. But I still think they're a top 3 or 4 rotation in the American League, and overall they're top 10 in baseball. I think you would say the Dodgers rotation is probably better. I think you would say the Phillies rotation is probably better. But after that, maybe the healthy Yankees rotation, but they're not healthy. Like that, they're not healthy right now. Not hypothetically not healthy. They're not healthy right now. And so we don't know how that will look. Obviously, the Astros rotation took a step back. The Rangers rotation certainly has some dogs at the top and some really high upside guys, but 3, 4, 5 still a bit of a question mark there. So I don't know if the Mariners road woes are proven at this point, just because it's hard to really glean anything from 2025 because of the injuries. But yeah, I mean, obviously they're going to be better at home. A, it's a great ballpark to pitch in, but also B, most players are better in their home ballpark because they get to go home at the end of it. They get their normal life, right? They get to be around things that are familiar. They don't have to worry about all the things that go with being on the road. So it's not all that uncommon for players to perform better in their home stadium. But yeah, obviously a big factor of that is that T-Mobile Park is such a good stadium to pitch in, and you get away with a lot more mistakes than you do when you're pitching in, Boston or New York. So yeah, it's a good question. I'm just not quite sure how to answer it yet, because I think it is easy to be like, they were 16th this year and 17th last year. And it's like, okay, but they were hurt this year. So, I mean, that doesn't mean they're not going to get hurt this year, but I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure what causes it. But I think it's a fair question to ask.
So Colby, a term that we often use on the show is swing player, which is to essentially signify a player that's going to have such a great impact on the club depending on how either good or bad they'll be. And for the Mariners rotation, I don't think you have to look any further than Logan Gilbert for that. Gilbert in 2025, in some ways, was actually at his best. 11.89 Ks per 9. That is by far a career high for him. 295 xFIP. That's a career low for him. In other ways, though, it was a significantly regressive year for him. You mentioned him as one of those 4 guys that got worse in 2025. And I agree with that, despite, some of the strides that he made in other areas of his game. Specifically because, and this is a sentence that I uttered a lot over the course of 2025, and I'm sure, a lot of you remember me saying this very often when talking about Logan Gilbert, he struggled mightily to put guys away in a timely fashion. That ballooned his pitch count, and therefore he wasn't able to get deep into games with any sort of regularity. On opening day, he went 7 innings against the A's. Great. That's the Logan Gilbert we all know and love, right? But then from that point forward, he went 5 2/3, 5, 4 2/3, and then eventually 3. That's when that start against the Marlins was cut short, and he went on the IL with his elbow issue. And, we were a bit worried about what that could have meant. We did, utter the words Tommy John at a couple of points in time over the course of his IL stint. Fortunately, he was able to make it back on June 16th against the Red Sox, and he was able to stick in the rotation for the remainder of the season from that point forward. but he didn't go more than 5 innings until more than 5 1/3 innings until July 22nd, when he went 6 1/3 against the Brewers. And he didn't go any further than that in any start from that point forward. He went 6 1/3 again against the Orioles. That's the deepest he went into a game after opening day. And those issues continued on into the postseason as well. I'm looking at his game log right here. I'm seeing a lot of 5 flat, 5 1/3, 4 2/3. There's even a 2-inning start here. That was that Philly start. That was just an absolute disaster. I think we all remember that. It was just very unlike Logan Gilbert in that way. Logan's been a very dependable starter, not just in terms of posting, but also, being able to get deep into games with consistency. So the key in 2026 for Logan Gilbert, very clear. Get deeper into the games, take pressure off of your bullpen, and do that with consistency. Be that dependable starter that you have been in the past.
Yeah, you can't be the staff ace if you're going 5 innings 75% of the time. You can't do it. And the pressure that puts on your bullpen, particularly when, Bryce is having the type of year that he was having last year, that George was also having some similar issues getting quick, efficient innings as well. It creates too big of a load on the arms of on the bullpen. And that's why you end up with 4 guys having to cover as many innings as they did, because, the bullpen wasn't all that deep. And you just felt like you had to use the same 4 guys over and over again, and it caught up with them at the end of the year. And so, a big part of this is adding Ferrer will help, but what would really help is Logan Gilbert going back to throwing the 200 innings we know he can, and staying healthy and pushing 6-7 inning starts on the regular, and the 5 inning starts becoming the outliers rather than the norm. And Logan has to get there. I mean, it's really that simple. You want to get paid the big bucks. You want to be the $35-40 million a year arm that you think you are. You can't do it by throwing 5 innings a night. Nobody's going to pay you that money for 5 innings a night. So it's a big year for Logan. We know that an extension may be on deck, or at the very least, he's getting ready for free agency. But again, 5 innings, 30 times a year ain't going to cut it. You got to be that dog. You got to go 6 and 7 innings on the regular. And if that means you have to sacrifice some of the strikeouts to do it, so be it. Figure it out.
Yeah, in general, the stuff just wasn't as good in 2025 either. He had some issues, landing the slider specifically. Left quite a few of those left a few of those over the plate as well. Just trying desperately to throw that pitch for strikes. So, we'll see. And he's made a little bit of a tweak, according to him. Something that he says probably isn't noticeable, but it's stuff to do with his core and his posture. So hopefully that leads to, better success for him as well, and keeping him, fresher as well. But, I'm looking at his game log from 2024, and, he went 8, plus 4 times. He went 7 a bunch of times in 2024. That's the guy that we know Logan Gilbert can be. That's the guy that he needs to be in 2026. All right, we'll talk about the rest of the rotation in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by TurboTax. Look, y'all, tax season doesn't have to take over your life, all right? Because this year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150, all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. All you have to do is file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen for all things Mariners. And also thank you for making the Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Baseball is back, and you can lock in by joining the Everydayer Club, which gets you ad-free episodes and access to our group chat on Discord. For the next week or so, you can use the promo code SPRING, that's SPRING, for a free month. Go to lockedonmariners.supercast.com or tap the link in the description to learn more. Also in the description, you can now vote for round 1 of our top 50 Mariners moments tournament. We launched that yesterday. That link is in the description, both here on YouTube and on podcast platforms. So be sure to check that out and make sure the link is there. And then all you have to do is just click that, hit a few buttons, submit. That's it. It's just like our Mariners fan survey that we did. And Colby, we have, I think you told me before we hit record on this thing, 350-ish submissions already.
I think so. So long ago, who can remember?
Right.
But 363 as we are recording this. Might be more by the time you guys are hearing this.
Right.
But yeah, 363 so far. It's a pretty good sample rate, and we've got some matchups that are tight and some other matchups that are tightening. So you might want to get over there and vote to make sure your favorite actually advances to round 2. But yeah, it's been a good first day, which a little surprising considering that most of our podcast listeners didn't get to listen to their episode until today. Hopefully go back and listen to it, guys. It's a lot of fun. We went through the whole bracket. And just kind of gave you some background on the process and all that if you guys are curious. So go listen to yesterday's episode. And also there's a video that like shows each of the moments we're talking about in case you guys our descriptions aren't clear enough. You can go and actually watch the moments yourself. So that'll be linked in the description down below as well. So make sure you vote, tell your friends to vote, pick your battles, pick your sides, and let's see, because I got to tell you, man, there is one matchup right now that is separated by about 10 votes out of 360 casts. So things are getting interesting, but there's still time for you to sway the results because we will not close the voting on this until Monday morning, and then we will start prepping for round 2.
Yeah. I'll just say this. If you want to see Victor Robles's great catch against the Astros move on, or maybe, Felix's final start move on, you might want to get on that.
That one could go either way. Yeah.
You might want to get on that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So getting back into our starting rotation preview here, let's talk about Bryan Woo. Career year, by all accounts, for Bryan Woo. Unfortunately, ended on a sour note with him being unable to finish the year and being unable to start for the Mariners in the postseason due to the pectoral strain or whatever exactly the issue was for him. But he was an all-star. He essentially established himself as one of the 10-ish best starters in all of baseball. Finished, 6th, I think, in AL Cy Young voting, 5th?
I think so, yeah.
AL Cy?
6th,
yeah, somewhere.
I think.
Somewhere in there. I'll double check that. In a second here. But it was either way you want to slice it, fantastic year for Bryan Woo. Again, unfortunate that it ended on kind of a sour note, but you have to be feeling great about Woo going into 2026, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny. We talk a lot about guys when they're prospects, and we're like, yeah, I mean, he's got a fastball, but you can't throw, only a fastball because these are major league hitters. Eventually they'll hit it. And Bryan Woo kind of tests that theory a little bit because he throws his 4-seamer and his 2-seamer like 75, 80% of the time. And he's one of the best pitchers in the American League. And so, I don't know.
He was 5th, by the way, in Cy Young voting.
I don't know what's left for him to really prove. I mean, I guess getting through a whole season without getting dinged up, but I mean, he basically did last year. It just, again, it happened at the worst possible time. He goes deep into games. He throws strikes. He gets whiffs. He gets strikeouts. He's good. He's a very good pitcher. Is there a way he can take another step forward? Sure. I mean, I guess at the slider or sweeper, whatever he's calling it these days, if that could take another step, if you can get a little bit more command on that, maybe a little bit more break on that pitch, sure, that would help. Or I guess you could add a cutter or a change up, something to help him against lefties. But he really found that front hip 2-seamer last year, and that was just an absolute weapon.
When he front hips it to lefties, that's my favorite pitch in the entire rotation. It really is.
I mean, look, Bryan Woo, he throws strikes, quality strikes. He gets tremendous value out of both of his fastballs. He can locate them in all 4 quadrants of the zone. And just being able to do that gives you such a high floor that it's basically improbable or maybe even impossible. We'll see if he can stay healthy. That's true of every pitcher we talk about over the next 2 days, if they stay healthy. All right, let's just make that blanket caveat right now.
Right.
Woo shouldn't be any worse than a number 3 just because of how valuable the fastball is and how he throws strikes, and his delivery is extremely repeatable. It's not like he's really gone through long bouts where he struggled to throw a bunch of strikes. Like, no, he's just very consistent, and he's going to get guys out with the fastball. And when you think you can hit his fastball, you can't. He's just going to throw more fastballs. And so that alone gives him the floor of a number 3 starter. And then again, like we saw last year, he was a number 1 or a number 2 for most of the year. And, we saw the slider, sweeper, again, whatever he's calling it these days, take a little bit of a step forward. If he could take another step, maybe he can finish top 3 in the Cy Young or maybe even win the thing. But the fastballs alone and the command alone give him a good chance to go out there and go 6 innings every single time out. And he basically what he did last year.
Yeah. The last 2 years combined, Bryan Woo has thrown 299 strikeouts to 49 walks. That is insane. That is insane.
6-to-1 ratio. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Again, like you said, we'll say this about every pitcher that we talk about, or like that's just kind of it's like the unspoken thing, right? If they stay healthy, let's just
all agree that that's the caveat, so we don't have to say it before every single arm we talk about.
Yeah, it applies a little bit more so to Bryan Woo, though, given his history. And I'm really interested to see how his body responds in 2026 to throwing 186 and 2/3 innings, which is by far the most innings he's ever thrown in his entire life in a season. Look, this guy didn't throw a ton even in college, right? So like he really has, his arm hasn't been taxed like other guys up to this point in their career. So how does his body respond to that? And can he do it again? What is the repeatability of 2025 for Bryan Woo?
Yeah, I mean, like, if Woo just is always going to be dinged up, it's not going to be because he's not like built to handle the workload. He is extremely athletic. He works very hard. He's got the size, the strength, and all that. It's just some guys, get a little bit unlucky, and it just kind of James Paxton, for example. So now Woo has been able to battle through it more than somebody like James has or was. Mariners fans aren't too unfamiliar with the ace-like stuff of a guy who just constantly feels like they're dinged up, and hopefully Woo is not the next in that line. But right now, until he gets through a whole season, he basically did last year. It's really sucky that it happened when it happened. I'm pretty confident Woo will be fine. I think, maybe he's not a guy that you want going 200 innings. Maybe he's a guy that you kind of have to short start every once in a while just to make sure, but you'd much rather have, a healthy Bryan Woo in the playoffs than worry about getting him, 28 starts in a row where he goes 6 innings plus, or whatever it was. So we'll see how it goes for him this year. But yeah, I really don't think there's much of a reason to worry about Bryan Woo.
Now, another guy that we need to at least acknowledge the injuries with is Bryce Miller, Colby, because it was a big part of his story in 2025. Pitching through these loose bodies, these bone spurs in his forearm/elbow area. He clearly just wasn't the guy that we had come to know and love over the last couple of years leading into 2025. This year, he said that he didn't get the surgery to address those loose bodies in the offseason, but he feels 100%. And we did start to see him turn the corner in October. He was your worst starter in the regular season. He very well might have been your best in October. The way he pitched in some of the biggest games of the entire year for the Mariners, pitching game 1 in a hostile environment in Rogers Center, starting that game off, by the way, by giving up a homer to George Springer and then just locking in from that point forward and giving the Mariners the chance to win that game. And they ultimately did. We saw some real maturity, some real growth out of Bryce Miller in October, and it essentially came out of left field given the way that his regular season has gone. So does that small sample size, relatively small sample size, inspire enough confidence in you to feel good about Bryce going into 2026? Or are you still concerned given that he hasn't had the surgery and all that?
I'm concerned because it just feels like having loose bodies around those tendons in your elbows is a recipe for disaster at some point. Maybe it's, 3 years down the line. Maybe it's 3 months into the season. I don't know. So from that aspect, I'm concerned. And it's also one of those things where it's like, are you always going to think you can pitch through that? And you're just like, oh, we just need 2 weeks off. And you're just kind of this guy because you try to avoid, getting the surgery done. Like those are my concerns with Bryce. If he's healthy, I'm not concerned about Bryce's performance really at all. I mean, we know who Bryce is. He's going to go deep into games. He's not going to strike out a ton of dudes, but he's going to strike out enough, and he's not going to walk anybody. We know how good the splitter is. We know how much value he gets out of the fastball at the top of the zone. And we know that he can really spin a couple of breaking balls. So it's just kind of about finding consistency there. I mean, 2024 Bryce Miller was really good, deserved more, Cy Young hype than he got. And the stat I love that I didn't pull up this time, but, it involved people with more innings pitched and lower ERAs than Bryce Miller. And the list was like Garrett Cole, Tarek Skubal, and like Garrett Crochet. Like it was an insane list. And so, we know who this guy is. He can eat innings for you. He can give you the low 3, high 2 ERA type of season. And if he's healthy, the floor really does seem like he's going to strike out 8.5 guys per 9. He's going to walk, 2 guys per 9. He's going to have a mid 3 ERA, and he's just going to be a 2.5, 3-win pitcher. And that's probably the floor if he's healthy. So, in terms of like, if you're telling me that the bone spurs aren't going to be an issue at all this year, I'm going to tell you Bryce Miller's a 3.5 win pitcher this year, and I'm going to bank on it and feel really good about it. So I'm not concerned right now about performance. It's just, how are those floating bodies that apparently didn't need to be removed, how are they going to impact them, and are they going to crop up at the worst possible time? And that's always going to be in the back of your head. I'm pretty, I don't know, I guess you say I'm pretty bullish on Bryce heading into 2025 or 2026. Sorry.
Coming up next, our thoughts on the 2026 seasons for George Kirby, Luis Castillo, and then we'll also talk about the depth behind this group of 5 in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Indeed. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed Sponsored Jobs is the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certifications, and location. If I were hiring, I wouldn't just want someone who can help. I'd want someone with real experience who can jump right in. That's what I like about Indeed. You can get specific and target exactly what you need. It saves time because you're spending less energy sorting through mismatches. And with sponsored jobs, your post gets seen by candidates who are actually a fit. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help you get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring. Do it the right way with Indeed. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, we have a Patreon. It's called Control the Zone, and on there we talk Mariners, Seahawks, all that good stuff. For more information, go to patreon.com/Control the Zone. Link in the description of this episode. So let's talk about Luis Castillo, Colby. Called him the stabilizer in this rotation for good reason last year, because first and foremost, he was the only guy out of the 5 to actually stay healthy from point A to point B. Problem was, on the road, he was mostly really bad. He greatly contributed to some of those road issues that we talked about at the start of the show. But, towards the end of the year, he really locked in. He came up with some big time starts. Again, he was the stabilizer in this rotation. And, hopefully that continues going into 2026. I'm a little surprised that he's here. I'm not going to lie to you, but, I kind of assumed going into this offseason that he was going to get traded, that he was going to get, maybe essentially salary dumped. That didn't happen. And I'm okay with that. I'm glad that didn't happen because I really like Luis Castillo, and I still think that he can be a real big part of this rotation moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, look, the guy is just a walking 180 innings of mid-3 ERA, baseball or high 3 ERA baseball. And is he going to, wow people with the stuff anymore? No. Is he going to blow fastballs by people? Kind of. I mean, I know the velo, everybody's worried about the velo, but he still gets plenty of whiffs on the four-seamer. He still gets lots of value out of that pitch. And there's always just, the remote possibility that Luis can, maybe find the changeup he once had or get a little more value out of the slider, tweak that a little bit. Luis not really known for, tweaking things or anything like that. He just kind of does what he does and the results speak for themselves. So we'll see if there's a wrinkle that he can add, but yeah, he struggles sometimes. You can tell when he's in trouble, when he starts missing glove side. That's a pretty early tell. And it usually happens early in a game. But yeah, I mean, like Luis, look, if I had to bank my week on somebody giving me 6 2/3 out of this rotation, I would bank it on Luis, even though it might not look pretty. He'll figure out a way to get it done. And he can certainly still dominate the bad teams, and he'll keep you in the game against the really good teams. And he had an okay postseason. There's still some trust here in this guy. And even though he's probably your 5th best starter, he'd be the number 2 or 3 on the number 2 on a couple of teams and the number 3 on a couple of, actual playoff contenders. So he's still really good. And I feel like he's kind of in the JP camp where people are overlooking him and they're rushing to get him out the door. And it's just like, I mean, I get it. There's exciting young players behind him, but Luis is still kind of a dog and you need him. And he is the stabilizing force in that rotation. And, when all else fails and all the young arms are banged up and they're trying to figure something out, there goes Luis Castillo. And you know what? He might give up 4 or 5 runs, but he's going to give you 7 innings. When you really need it. And he also still occasionally will just absolutely dominate a team with mostly just the fastball at the top of the zone. And, at T-Mobile Park, there's probably not, he's probably part of the big 4 when he's at T-Mobile Park. It becomes a true big 5. When you're on the road, you try to work around it. You try to survive that start. But at T-Mobile Park, he might be your 2nd best starter if he's pitching at T-Mobile. So, he still has that upside. Luis, again, just kind of people are being fatigued with consistency and good performance when they think that elite performance is being blocked when we just can't possibly say that. Luis is got 1 more year on his deal after this. We'll see if he sticks around. We've been writing him off for the last couple of years because the velo's been bad and all that. We've been trying to trade him and yet he just shows up every year. He gives you 180 innings and I think he's missed 1 start in his Mariners career, and it was at the end of a season that didn't matter, and he would have pitched if it had mattered, and they just we'll just put him on the IL. So durable, consistent, still solid. This guy is exactly what a rotation needs, and when you have as many concerns about the rotation as you do on the health perspective, Castillo is exactly what this squad needs, and so I'm happy to see him still here.
So George Kirby, lastly. Overall, strange year for George. I'm not gonna lie. He starts the year obviously, on the IL with the shoulder thing, and then he comes back, and it's a different George Kirby. The arm angle is different, and he finally, this is something that a lot of people were asking for. He finally kind of traded off some of the walk rate for more strikeouts. 9.79 Ks per 9. That's a career high for him. Career high walk rate though as well. First time he ever exceeded 2 in that regard, 2.07. It was a career worst year for him, ERA wise. FIP wise, though, pretty much in line with his career norms. So 4.21 ERA, but the FIP 3.37. It was 3.26 the year before that. It was 3.34 the year before that. Overall 2.5 win season for George Kirby by FanGraph standards.
Yeah, be about a 3-win pace if you didn't miss time.
Yeah. But I think you and I are both in agreement that we're a bit underwhelmed with what we saw from George Kirby.
I feel like George is who he is. We keep on trying to predict the next step and like, oh, he's going to explode this year. I don't think it's going to happen. I think George is a very good number 3, an elite number 3, or he's a low end number 2. He's going to throw strikes. He'll miss a good amount of bats, but I don't think we're going to see George become, the 2.5 ERA guy, put up the 6-7 win season. Because if it was going to happen, feels like it would have already. And he keeps tinkering. He keeps on adding new pitches. He changes things up, and the results always end up being roughly the same. His big problem last year is that he could get you to 0-2 pretty quick. He could get 2 outs pretty quick. He had a real hard time finishing guys off, and he had a real hard time getting out of innings. The number of times he would get 2 quick outs on 8 pitches and then have to throw another 12 to 15 to get out of the inning. It was a lot. I just think Kirby's going to be, mid 3 ERA guy. He's probably going to give you 180 innings, and he'll have 2 or 3 starts where he's just piping fastballs down the middle and he loses focus and he gets mad because somebody didn't make a play behind him, and he just kind of, whatever, I don't want to be here anymore. And then he'll have games where he's Furious George and he's 8 innings of 11 Ks and 1 hit and it'll all even out at the end, and he'll just be really good. Like I don't think George is going to be bad. He's never been bad. Over the course of an entire season, he's never been bad. He's certainly been bad for moments. But George is going to be really good. But is he going to take that next step? Is he going to be the number 1 that we think he can be? I don't think that's ever going to happen.
It's weird because I feel like we actually saw some strides being made in terms of maturing on the mound and, not letting some things get to him. We talked about this a lot last year when we previewed Kirby's year, and we said that we would, we wanted to see more maturity out of him in that regard and not, let every little thing that goes wrong to ultimately just completely derail his starts, because it felt like that had happened in the past. And, there were, again, like I said, there were moments this year where I felt like he actually did that. I forget exactly what happened. It was a start in Anaheim, but he didn't get a call that went his way. And then it was bases loaded, and you could see he was a bit frustrated about that, but he was actually able to lock in and get out of it. I was like, okay, that's different. That's actual, that's growth. He wasn't just he didn't do the thing that you said where he just starts piping fastballs and it's just we'll see what happens. Yeah. Right. He actually really got into his bag, dug in and got out of it. But then there was, the Tampa start, down at Steinbrenner. And something about pitching in Tampa, by the way, with George Kirby, something that makes him go off the rails down there. But
the Tampa Bay Rays and Kerry Carpenter, 2 things you never want to see George Kirby face. Yeah.
The playoffs were a bit of a mixed bag as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm a bit confused about how I feel about George Kirby right now. And it's possible this could be his last year in a Mariners uniform. We haven't acknowledged that yet, but that is a possibility.
Mm-hmm. We talked about a little bit, why we talk about Logan getting extended and not George and all that. And just kind of not the bad fit of Kirby with Seattle, but just very clearly it's not the same as it is with Logan and Bryce and Bryan. There's a disconnect there. And it's not just us speculating that. We've heard that from people who are actually connected, they're with the team every day and we can kind of see just with our own eyes, just a little bit different, just a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with that. And George, while he's here, he's going to be good. I really don't doubt that George will be good. And I'm not worried about that aspect of it. But yeah, it could be George's last year. We'll see. Might matter if there's an off season or not, because they might not just simply have time to trade him next winter. But I think George will bounce back to some degree, but I don't think he's going to take that full step forward. If anything, he takes a half step forward to be back where he was in 23 and 24. I think that's where we're most likely to find George in 26. But even last year, his worst year, still pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, it was a solid year. I definitely think we can get more out of George Kirby. I'm not saying Cy Young year like I was talking about a couple of years ago, but I definitely think there's another year past what he did in 2025.
I hope to see it someday while he's still wearing a Mariners uniform, of course.
Well, more so what I'm talking about is just more so getting back to who he was the years prior, right? Yeah. I think that, just in terms of what he did in 2025, I think there's a gear above that for Kirby for sure. So let's quickly talk about one of the guys that might make the Mariners feel a little bit better about trading George Kirby, whether it's next winter or just eventually down the road. That's Kade Anderson, who has taken spring training by storm so far with what he's done in live BP. We talked about this when they drafted him. He's very advanced. He pitched in the SEC at a very, 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 very high level for LSU. We didn't think that it was going to take long for him to start getting into the conversation of making the rotation, and it seems like we're well on our way to that being the case. He's gonna start the year and probably Double-A would be my guess.
Yeah,
I don't think they'll waste their time. Waste his time with
it'll be
with
Double-A.
Yeah, and probably mid-season. He might be ready for his first taste of major league action. But what are ultimately your expectations for Kade Anderson in 2026?
Yeah, specifically in 2026, it's so much of it is just kind of like learn how to be a big leaguer and learn how to get big league hitters out. And some of it is just stuff. You'll be able to do that on stuff alone, but other things, you got to set up certain pitches and you have to do things in the first at bat that set up the second at bat and all that. It's knowing when, you can throw that 3-1 fastball and knowing when you have to take a shot on the 3-1 slider and see if you can get a whiff on it. Like it's just little things like that you have to pitch and you have to really know who you are as a big leaguer before you can actually go out and execute it over and over and over again. So I think in general, if Cade has to make, 10 starts or whatever, then I think he'll throw strikes. I think he'll be competitive. I think he'll grind out innings. I don't think he's going to be, Paul Skeens as a rookie or anything like that, but I think he'll probably be a little better than Logan Gilbert when he came up his rookie year, probably a little better than Bryce and Bryan and George too. I think he is a step above where they were at when they debuted. It's just, he's technically he hasn't played professional baseball yet. So you got to be careful there, but he did throw 130 some odd innings last year. So it's not like, he threw 80 and now you got to kind of baby step him to, 100, 110. Like, no, he could probably go from 130 to 160, depending on how they feel. And he bulked up a little bit this winter. He's still very skinny, very like slight, but he did add some good weight and that should help him along the way. You got to be a little bit careful because of the past Tommy John, but what pitcher hasn't had Tommy John in their past? It's really hard to find one. So yeah, overall, if he does have to come up, I think he'll contribute. I think he'll be a solid contributor. And I might have a bold take about him when we get to our bold take episode. So, do you want a little preview now or no? We'll save it. We'll save it. Yeah. I mean, it's not even March yet, but it's, I think he'll be solid whenever he makes his debut. And then I think he'll build off of that. So I think he'll be a big leaguer. Like you're not going to be looking at him like we look at Emerson Hancock and we're like, sometimes, yeah. Other times,
right.
Ooh, so yeah, we'll see how it goes. But I think ideally you'd like to not see him make any starts this year. But we'll see. I don't think it'll be long before he's the number 6 guy in the Mariners depth chart. I mean, honestly, it might happen before, the end of April if he's pitching really well in Arkansas, but hopefully you don't need him. But I think we know it. Like if somebody goes down and they're going to be down for a month, then, Anderson will be on that short list. If somebody goes down and they just need like a spot start, then it'll still be the Diaz, the Hancocks. Like, so he's not the number 6 in that sense, but like, if Kirby goes down for a month and they need a guy from May to June, I think they would go to Anderson. I don't think they're going to be that. I don't think they're going to be that cautious in terms of getting him up to the big leagues too early.
Now they lost Logan Evans during the offseason to Tommy John, but I think you have to feel better about their depth than this year than last year because they've added guys like Cooper Criswell who they might have to stash in the bullpen. Just
is Emerson Hancock part of the depth or is he part of the bullpen discussion?
I don't know, but at the very least, I feel like Criswell might be ahead of him either way.
Should be.
And Dane Dunning might be ahead of him. And Criswell and Dunning have a lot of major league starting experience in their past. even for Dunning, who's struggled as of late, he has, had some success at the major league level. Randy Dobnak has had some major league success in the past. It's been a few years since then, but at the very least, they have some guys who've been there and done that now.
Whereas Wilcox has got some upside too.
Yeah, Cole Wilcox has some upside. They have
old reliable Casey Lawrence.
Very quickly last year you would run into the blast. Because I mean, look, the first week of the season they had Luis F. Castillo starting for them. Yeah, so
did not stand for fun.
No, it did not. So I feel like they're in a better spot depth wise. I don't think they have amazing depth. No. But when you throw in like Kade Anderson will be part of that depth pretty quickly, and then they get maybe Ryan Sloan eventually. I think that's maybe a bit more of a stretch than
post All-Star break. It starts to become a little bit more of a real conversation, but even then it's like probably
at that point at that point too, you got to wonder about innings and all that is, but whatever. Either way, like maybe Ryan Sloan's part of the depth. Cade Anderson is definitely part of that equation. And then you got the Criswells, the Dobnaks, the Dunnings of the world. I feel like they're in a pretty good spot with their depth. I feel like they protected themselves a lot better.
Yeah, I feel like Criswell's a guy who could throw really well at T-Mobile. So I don't think they're going to risk losing him to the waiver wire. He's out of options. So I think they'll stash him in the bullpen, and if somebody goes down, maybe they call up, Hancock or Dunning, and they kind of like piggyback Criswell so that he can, build up to being able to go 5 or 6 innings. But I don't think that's going to take that long. He's been a starter for a long time, and he's, kind of being sent out right now as a starter in spring training. He's on that schedule where he's going to throw 2 innings, and then he'll probably throw 3 or 4 in his next outing. But I think the Mariners really like him. I think they can actually they think they can get value from him out of the bullpen as more than just, an emergency an emergency long relief guy. And if, they do have to make that call, then I think they really like Criswell. So I think he's the number 6, even though he's going to start the year in the bullpen. And then, Hancock, we'll see if he makes the opening day roster as a bullpen member. My hunch is they send him down to AAA just to keep him stretched out. So if they do have to, pivot to Criswell, they can call up Hancock to eat some innings as Criswell builds up his pitch count. But yeah, and like you said, Dunning's had some success in the big league level. Dobnak has had some success. And, if you just need a spot start, you could always add Casey Lawrence to the 40-man and DFA him and do that whole rigmarole again.
He'll probably go to Toronto for a little while, and probably come back, and then probably go back to Toronto for a little while.
If Casey Lawrence gets called up at any point this year, he will tie the franchise record for most unique stints with the Seattle Mariners. It would be his 4th separate stint with the Mariners, and that would tie him with Raul Ibanez. It's kind of 2 ends of the spectrum there, huh? Of like, this guy was a Mariner 4 different times, and it's like, one of them was like the classic journeyman 4A type, and the other one is Raul freaking Ibanez. So
Casey Lawrence, the best basketball player in Mariners history.
Yes, apparently. So I do feel reasonably well about. Again, we'll see when Anderson is ready. Hopefully, you don't need him, but like he's the one who could actually step in and replace some of the production from somebody who gets hurt. Everybody else is kind of a number 5 type, and that's fine. Like not too many teams have. The Mariners have arguably 5 number 3s, and then you might throw Anderson in there if you're really optimistic about him and say they have 6 number 3s. How many teams have 7 number 3s or 8 number 3s? Most teams have, they have 2 number 3s, a number 4, and then like 6 number 5, 6, 7 types. So like, it's don't.
Don't think I didn't catch it.
You're the one that won't let it die. This is on you. But anyways, I feel okay about the depth.
I'm just giving the people what they want. The people want me to acknowledge it.
So that's all I'm going to say about that. Good luck editing this, jerk.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Once again, if you never miss an episode, it's time to make it official. Join the Locked On Everydayer Club. Get ad-free audio, access to our members-only Discord, and more, all built for our most loyal fans. For Colby Patnode, I'm Titan Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at @LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Titan Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. We're also on Blue Sky. You can follow me at TDG, Colby at MLB Colby, and the show at Locked On Mariners. You can also find us on Instagram at Locked On Mariners. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.